Goals, and even more goals, baby, as we waited 31 years for this game. Unfortunately for the Oilers, the Flames take game one 9-6. No, this isn't the 80s. It is 2022 as the 2022 iteration of the Battle of Alberta has begun. What went wrong for the Oilers in game one? What are the few things that actually did all right? And we'll get into the good, the bad, and the ugly on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host, Brett Holden, and on today's episode, let's be honest, game one of the Battle of Alberta, well, from a neutral perspective, went exactly how you would want it to, but from the Oilers' perspective, I didn't think that we would actually have an episode after last series that was actually worse than the game the Oilers had in game 4 against the LA Kings. But here we are. The Oilers had the worst game once again I have ever seen in a playoff game. Ever. So there are only a few things that the Oilers did right. I'll be honest with you, when I was going through the things that the Oilers could have went right to get ready for today's episode, it was dull. But we'll get into a couple of things that the Oilers can take a look on and say, you know what, we did pretty decent in that. So we'll get into that in just a little bit as well. We are going to get into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this game one. Obviously, the ugly will be quite lengthy. The bad will be just as lengthy, and the good just will not be what you expect. So we will get into that later on today, but let's get started with what the Oilers did poorly. That is where we're going to start on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Plus, we're here on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All right, oil country. Breathe. Game one's over. And we got that stinker out of the way. It was a 9-6 drubbing by the Calgary Flames in game one. As I mentioned on the crossover episode with Jess yesterday, I just couldn't get that 9-5 game out of my head. And I guess with good reason. Even Jess tweeted out during the game at the Real Holden 40, you know what I had said? Well, this is me paraphrasing. I had said that I couldn't get the game out of my head, the 9-5 game out of my head, and don't see it coming out of my head anytime soon. I don't think it's coming out of any Oilers fans' heads anytime soon either, as the Calgary Flames just built on that confidence, I guess, would be the best way to put it. I can't even say what the Flames are feeling right now because we're on the wrong side of this. What did the Oilers do poorly in that game? Let's just start with the obvious. They didn't start any of the periods. They thought that they were 15-minute periods, actually 14-minute periods, because the Edmonton Oilers allowed 6 goals in the first 6 minutes of each period. First 6 minutes and 10 seconds, I should be specific, because the Flames did score 6 minutes and 10 seconds into the third period, I believe, off the top of my head. We will get to those stats more later on and more in depth later on as well. But the Oilers' starts have just been awful in all of the playoffs. Every single game, all 8 of them haven't shown up. Maybe a little bit in game 7. But you're going into your biggest rival ever in the first playoff series in 31 years, and you allow 2 goals in the first 51 seconds. 51 seconds, you're already down 2-0. I said to Jess in yesterday's episode that I feel if the Oilers are down 2 goals, even 3 goals in Calgary, it's going to be done. The Oilers were down 2 goals in 51 seconds. How do you expect to win a hockey game when you can't even lace up your hockey skates and you're already down 2 goals? I think Ryan McLeod was still trying to get his gloves from the locker room by the time that they scored. They were dropping the puck after the second goal. I genuinely, when I wrote down what the Oilers did poorly in this game, I put everything. They had no momentum anywhere. The Flames beat them to every puck. The Flames beat them in every puck battle. Even when the Oilers were starting to mount their comeback, they just happened to go into the net. And we will get into why those happened to go into the net and what the Oilers actually did well, because the Oilers actually did play well offensively. The Oilers scored 6 goals. We spoke about in the Kings series when the Oilers scored 4 goals. They're like, hey, you expect to win. When you score 5 goals, you expect to win. When you score 6 goals, you expect to win. Not when you allow 9. 9. What are we doing? Like every single person, Darnell Nurse, Jay Woodcroft, and Leon Draisaitl came out after the game for their post-game availabilities, and each and every one of them said nobody did their job. Nobody. This did not look like a 2022 hockey game. It did not. It did not. The Edmonton Oilers just let the Calgary Flames run amok on them. They just let them do whatever they wanted. In the first period, they dominated. 30 shots on goal for the Calgary Flames in the first 25 minutes of the game. The Oilers were outshot 30-8 in the first 25 minutes of the game. What are we doing? What? I can't even conceptualize as to what even could have possibly gone wrong other than the fact that you just did not decide to show up. The Oilers were outshot 48-28 in last night's game. I mean, everybody knows that the Calgary Flames are a team who loves to throw the puck at the net from anywhere. We saw that against when the Flames did that against Dallas, and that was exactly how they won the series against Dallas. A weird point, a weird angle shot, a sharp angle shot that just happens to go off the hottest goaltender in the league at the moment. And guess what? Guess who's still in the playoffs, and guess who isn't? The Calgary Flames, who just won 9-6 against their biggest rivals ever, are still in the playoffs, and the Dallas Stars are golfing somewhere. And it doesn't help that the Oilers had 10 giveaways after 20 minutes. After one period, the Oilers had 10 giveaways, 20 over the entire game. Half of them came in that first period. But the thing about the Oilers is that they actually had a terrific second period. Just like they had in this series against the Kings, they had great second periods. Where's the start? Where is the start? The last thing that I do want to get to that the Oilers just did super poorly was their power play. 0 for 4 on their power play. And even the Oilers were getting a power play late in the game that could have brought them back into it. And Evander Kane takes a penalty. In one of the weirdest plays in could ever possibly imagine. And we'll get into that as well in the later part of today's episode. But Matthew Tkachuk's goal to seal it late in the game, was what many people imagined or thought was illegal, which it wasn't. We will get into that rule as well. But because Evander Kane took that extra penalty, it gave them the opportunity to get Matthew Tkachuk to legally, and I say that with disdain, get out onto the ice instead of Oliver Shillington. Zach Kassian took a stupid penalty after the Oilers got a massive goal in the game, and the Flames took advantage of it. It's rudimentary things. It's elementary things. It really is. Went down to the base bones of hockey. The first few things that you learn about hockey, the Oilers just did not do, and it cost them game one of the Battle of Alberta in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. As I have things dropping all over the place, I am just as disorganized as the Oilers were in game one. But what did the Oilers actually do well in game one? The Oilers still scored 6 goals, so they must have done something well. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, Built has a brand new flavor that we want to tell you about. I love brownies. Okay, I love brownie. Personally, I'm a corner guy. I love getting that crispiness on the corner as well. But you know what I love more? That brownie batter. Sometimes I eat half the batter just while I'm making the brownies themselves. Now imagine if you could lick that batter, the brown batter spatula, excuse me, and get some protein in it. You're in luck because with Built's brand new creation, this one is better than ever. The Brownie Batter Puff. Yes, Brownie Batter Puff. That's what I just said. The Brownie Batter Puff has protein bars on a whole new level, and they continue to be available right now at built.com with 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar. Brownie batter puffs are the perfect pick me up to any day. The brownie batter puffs will have you completely forgetting that you are eating a protein bar. No need to pinch yourself for this. They all have 100% real chocolate. Plus, they are made with collagen proteins, in which your body actually absorbs more efficiently, and they have tons of health benefits. Make sure you head to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15, that is locked 15, to get 15% off your next order. That is locked 15 to get 15% off your next order at built.com. Ugh. They're just those built bars. Me and Jess were talking about it yesterday. The built bars are so good. They're so good. We just got the cookie batter ones in recently, and now oh my goodness, or cake batter, excuse me, the birthday cake. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I have to get this water in me from all the yelling that I was doing in game one. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. But thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Oilers. Oh, I'm so happy you're here, and I'm so happy you were able to make Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Hey, and if you want, for your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On Now, the Locked On Now podcast, which has nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It is free and available wherever you find your podcasts. All right. It was a little bit of a negative first part of the episode, so let's get positive, as only one can after watching a 9-6 drubbing for the Oilers. But again, like I mentioned, the Oilers still scored 6 goals. It's not like the Oilers were bad for 60 minutes. I mean, were they? Kind of, I guess so. But let's be real here. Once again, the Oilers still scored 6. But how did that happen? Every single time the Edmonton Oilers threw a puck towards Jacob Markstrom, it was just an absolute mess. It was a crapshoot in front of Jacob Markstrom. It seemed like the guy could barely control or contain any pucks that came towards him. It really was a circus every time the Oilers threw something on him. So why not shoot more? Why not? And honestly, every single goal that the Oilers had were just off of easy little shots. The Zach Hyman goal coming around the net, shoots it, roofs it, goal. The Evan Bouchard goal where McDavid spun around. Beautiful feed from McDavid. It just gets through Markstrom. Every one of those shots had gone through Markstrom, not even roofed it on Markstrom. They didn't, I wouldn't even go so far to say that they beat Markstrom. They went through Markstrom. Jacob Markstrom was a Swiss cheese. I'm sorry. I mean, it's coming from the Oilers side who just let in 9 goals. But to be fair, Mike Smith let in 3. Mikko Koskinen let in 6. Or well, actually 5 because the 9th goal was a empty netter. Excuse me. Jacob Markstrom let in 6. Between the two teams, Jacob Markstrom actually let in the most amount of goals in game 1. Yet he was still the winning goaltender. In the season series between the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames, Jacob Markstrom was a .884 save percentage. Why are we not shooting the puck more? Why are we not seeing the Oilers shoot the puck from every angle? It is clear that is the Flames' strategy, so why not use that to their advantage? We saw it against against the Kings. The Kings would always shoot against the Oilers. It's Todd McClellan's quota. Just shoot the puck. And look what happens. You force a scrum in front of the net and something might happen. Look what happened against Jacob Markstrom last night. The Oilers just shot the puck and maybe something would squeak out. And something would squeak out and the Oilers would get a goal. The Oilers need to shoot more. And when they did shoot, it was great for the team. Something happened. There was something going for the Oilers. There was no difference maker for the Oilers. So when those shots happened, there was just nothing to follow up. There was nobody to follow up on the initial play. And that was where the issues really started to lie, was that the Oilers would start to get something going, but there was just no momentum. The power play was 0 for 4. Every time the Oilers were let back into the game by the Flames, they just let it go. The Oilers scored a goal, they were on the penalty kill. But the penalty kill had some great moments. The penalty kill genuinely had a lot of moments where they just killed the Flames' momentum, which turned defense into offense, which we talked about in the last series. If you prevent the team from scoring in your one end, you're going to score in the other end. That's just how it's going to happen. Excuse me. We talked about it with Cody Ceci. We talked about it with Brett Kulak. We talked about it with so many of the players in the last series. And they excelled in the last series. But you need to make sure you are preventing the goals on the other side. I know this was supposed to be the segment of what did the Oilers do well, but it just seems like once we start talking about what the Oilers did well, we just realize what the Oilers did so poorly as well. Whatever the Oilers did well, there's been a counterpoint to what the Oilers did wrong. And to be honest with you, whenever the Oilers had some sort of question, the Flames had an answer for it. And whenever the Flames had a question, the Oilers just didn't have an answer. And that is why the Flames won game 1. But the only thing that the Oilers did have kind of going for them in that response, or that kind of I guess quota, or let's say lane. Lane is probably the right answer. The Oilers believed that they could still go out there and win the game. As I was taking my game notes in the second period, and the Oilers started to claw back, you know what? It got to 6-4, and I wrote down in my notes, I said, the Oilers can get just one more. If they can bring this within 1, they might have a chance. And they did. Leon Draisaitl, excuse me, a guy that you need to have going in this series for the Oilers to be successful, goes out there and scores a massive goal before the end of a period. Oilers go out the next period, they tie the game. They never didn't think that they were out of the game. They always thought that they were going to come back at some point in this game. We've seen the Oilers numerous times in this season actually be able to come back from massive losses, massive deficits, I should say. The number one game that comes to me or comes to my mind is the November 3rd game or November 5th game, excuse me, against the New York Rangers, where they were down 4-1 and ended up winning 6-5 in overtime. The Oilers know that they can come back when they're down, and that is a positive, if there is any positive from being down early in a game, especially being down 2-1, 51 seconds into a game, is that you actually have the rest of the 59 minutes left in the game to come back. The Oilers realized that. The Oilers were down 4 goals twice in the game, but they realized we still have a lot of game left. The game was 5-1 with 25 minutes left, or 25 minutes, excuse me, into the game. That leaves an X amount of 45 minutes still to be played. 25, 45, something like that. I told you, I went to math. I didn't go to math school. I went to art school. I'm not good with math, but the Oilers just can't fall down like that. They can't get down in games like that at all. Okay, we went through the bad. We went through a little bit of the good, but let's actually go through the good, the bad, and the ugly from game one between the Edmonton Oilers and the Calgary Flames, the Battle of Alberta. And we will do that in just a second. But first, let's talk about our partners at BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's NHL hockey playoffs. The Oilers are really going to be considered the underdogs going into the rest of this series, as you can go on to BetOnline's odds tomorrow and see just how those are. The Major League Major League season, excuse me, Major League Baseball season is in full swing. Those Jays are doing so well. I love seeing some offensive baseball. Plus, next season's NFL futures. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the NFL's schedule is now out. It's great, by the way. I didn't mention this. The NFL had a fantastic schedule release. I know we're not an NFL channel, but props to the NFL on that. Bet Online is your continued source for all your sporting and wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet Online, where the game starts. I'm reaching for my water as, again, I mentioned so much yelling. So much yelling. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think we all need some water in us, though. Water is important. Anyways, let's close this show today on the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because there wasn't a lot of good. There was a lot of bad. And potentially even more ugly, as the ugly can certainly turn uglier as the series goes on. But let's start positive. The good. The good from game one. Obviously, everybody knows how good Connor McDavid is, so it's 4 points. Get that out of here. I want to talk about Zach Hyman's 2 goals, baby. As I mentioned, Zach Hyman has never gotten out of the first round of the playoffs. I mean, he's played with the Toronto Maple Leafs his entire career, so I guess that kind of explains it. Sorry, Toronto fans, I just had to. You guys, all the best. I'm sure we'll be there soon. But Zach Hyman coming out here in a massive game for the Edmonton Oilers. Again, this is the biggest rival for the Edmonton Oilers ever. I mean, I don't have to say that. Everybody in Edmonton realizes that you don't like Calgary. Zach Hyman got the message. Zach Hyman went out there, and other than Connor McDavid, was probably the Oilers' best player. In a 9-6 game, that's not exactly saying much, but Zach Hyman was one of the reasons that the Oilers, this wasn't a 9-2 hockey game, 9-1 hockey game. I don't even want to think about what it could have been. Like it could have been like the only hope that any Oilers fans can have going into game 2 is the fact that the Oilers did score 6 goals. And if Zach Hyman and Connor McDavid weren't there, where would they be? There would just be basically no hope. So the good in game one of the Battle of Alberta, Zach Hyman. Thank you so much, Zach. Welcome to Oil Country. Let's go to the bad, as this is something we've already talked about, as the bad just was bad, and something that the Oilers have continued to be bad at all playoffs, and that is their period starts. The start of the period, and it's not even the start of games anymore. It was the start of periods for the Oilers. They thought the period started at 14 minutes. Everybody talks about playing a full 60 minutes. Well, let's talk about taking 6 minutes off of each period. Well, okay, that's 14, 28, 36. The Oilers played what, 36 minutes of each period of the game? 36 minutes of the game. They decided to show up for 36 minutes of game one of the Battle of Alberta. 3 goals in the first 6 minutes of the first period. 3 goals in the first minute of the first 2 periods. 2 goals in 51 seconds in the first, and there was a goal also in the first minute of the second period. You're starting down already. We meant I don't want to say this because it kind of favors the Flames in this story, but I mentioned a couple days ago in one of our episodes the history of the Battle of Alberta. In 1984, the Calgary Flames were going into the series losing 13 straight to the Edmonton Oilers. Lanny McDonald went out in the media and said, all the Calgary Flames have to do is control the first period, and then we can take it from there. In game one, the Calgary Flames lost 5-2. The Calgary Flames then went on to go down 3-1 in the series. They won game 2, but they would end up losing the next 2 in Edmonton to make it 3-1. Or in Calgary, excuse me, because they would have started in Calgary, or in Edmonton, excuse me. And then the Calgary Flames managed to bring that 3-1 series all the way back to a game 7 because they were able to contain that first period. Well, the Edmonton Oilers need to take a page out of the 1984 Calgary Flames book and contain that first period, and then we can move forward. Let's move forward to the ugly as well, as the ugly was whoa. It was ugly. And that was the goaltending. And that's the goaltending on both sides. I can't believe I'm saying this because a lot of people had just etched up the Calgary Flames for the goaltending by a large margin. Well, now we're here. And Jacob Markstrom allowed the most amount of goals in game 1. 6 goals got past Jacob Markstrom, 5 goals got past Mikko Koskinen, and 3 goals got past Mike Smith in 9 shots. What are we doing? Like, if we put in a shooter tutor, would that be a better option? 9-6, the highest scoring Battle of Alberta ever in 2022. When the goaltenders on each side are 6'5" and have pads the size of Goliath. I don't even know what Goliath looks like, but I imagine that's what he would do if he was playing hockey, is playing goaltender in 2022. But we just got a 15-goal, 9-6 final in the Battle of Alberta when everybody was saying that the Flames had superior goaltending. And going into the series, two of the 3 best goaltenders in the playoffs. Statistically, at least. Because let's be real, Jake Ottinger was 100% the best goaltender and probably the best player, other than Connor McDavid, in all of the playoffs in the first round. Behind him statistically was Jacob Markstrom and Mike Smith. Something's going to have to change somewhere, anywhere. I mean, let's be real. Do the Oilers or the Flames, and the Flames, let's be real, just look at the game and just throw it out the window? Just go, oh, it is what it is. What is there to be done on each side? Let me know. What do you think needs to be done on each side? Obviously, there are a plethora of answers to that question. Thank you so much for listening to the Locked On Oilers podcast and for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL, from first round matchups to each and every single little kiss on the Stanley Cup. Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It is free and available wherever you find your podcast. Let's just take a breath. Let's regroup. Game 2 goes Friday night in Calgary at 8:30. Unfortunately, a late game, but it is what it is. It's the Battle of Alberta. We will have more on what did we see in game 1. We will have more of an analytical breakdown in tomorrow's episode, and what to expect in game 2 and in game 3, as it will be Friday tomorrow. It's Friday then. It's Saturday, Sunday. What? Shout out Lando Norris. Shout out the Edmonton Oilers and the Battle of Alberta. Battle of Alberta's back, baby. Game 2 goes Friday night at 8:30. Let's regroup. Stay safe, everybody.